They picked the wrong house. Yeah, that happened, and not because it was guarded or flashy or sitting behind some iron gate, but because the man inside had spent most of his life being looked through, talked over, underestimated. And he'd learned a long time ago that when people decide you're harmless, they stop watching their own hands. It was just after 2 in the morning when I first heard it, that low engine sound that doesn't belong in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of sound you feel more than hear. And I remember thinking, not fear exactly, just that familiar tightening in the chest, the one that says, pay attention now. I live alone, small place, end of the block, nothing special. And if you asked my neighbors who I was, they'd probably say something like, nice guy, keeps to himself, waves when you pass him, you know what I mean? That's how it always goes. They don't ask where you've been or what you've seen, and honestly, most days I prefer it that way. But that night, those cars didn't stop out front like normal people do. They rolled past, cut their lights, and parked down the street, and that's when I knew this wasn't a wrong turn or some drunk kid pulling over to check his phone. This was deliberate. I didn't grab a gun right away. People think that's the first move, but it's not. First thing you do is listen. Tires on wet pavement. Doors closing too quietly. Boots on gravel, trying not to sound like boots on gravel. That's when I got out of bed and touched the panel behind the bookcase, the one nobody sees unless they know to look for it, and the house went dark. Not cozy dark, not sleepy dark, but the kind of dark that swallows sound and makes men second-guess themselves. I saw them on the screen, 3 shapes, heat signatures glowing like bad intentions, 2 pistols and a breaching tool standing way too close together, sloppy, impatient, already convinced they were in control. And I remember thinking, not professionals, just loud men with badges and a plan they didn't bother to check twice. The door didn't open so much as explode wood, splintering inward, someone yelling, police search warrant. Get on the ground, the usual performance, and I almost laughed because there's something desperate about a man who has to shout authority into a room before he's earned it. They stormed in flashlights, swinging boots, heavy voices bouncing off walls like they wanted the house to be scared of them. And they moved fast. I'll give them that, clearing rooms, barking orders, already talking about money they hadn't found yet. When they hit the bedroom and saw the bed made untouched, that's when the confidence cracked, just a little. You can feel it in the air when that happens. One of them, the young one, drifted back into the living room and I saw him stop, really stop staring at the photos over the fireplace. The old black and whites, the shadow box with a patch that doesn't mean anything to most people, and I knew his stomach had dropped. The others felt it too. Even before the house sealed itself, the door locking with that heavy metallic sound that tells you this isn't a normal lock. The shutters slamming down, the red lights, washing everything in a color that makes even clean hands look guilty. Then I spoke calm, even polite, because yelling is what you do when you're unsure, and I wasn't. I told them they seemed confused. I told them no warrant existed for my address that I'd checked, and when I mentioned the body cameras they weren't wearing, that's when panic really showed its face. Lights cut total darkness, and suddenly they weren't hunters anymore, just men breathing too loud in a space that felt smaller by the second. One of them tried the door, fired at the lock, sparks flew, nothing moved, and the sound of that gunshot indoors uncontrolled. That's when the young one almost broke. He noticed the knives were gone, his voice shaking when he said it, and I let the silence sit for a beat longer than necessary, because silence does more work than threats ever could. When I whispered behind them just one sentence, you broke my door. It was like flipping a switch. Gunfire, wild and useless, glass shattering, a man screaming because fear had finally caught up with him. And then I moved, not fast, not slow, just exactly as fast as I needed to. I took the leader's gun apart in his hand, felt bone give, heard him scream, and before the big one could turn, I took his knee out clean and surgical, and he went down howling, because size doesn't mean much when balance is gone. The kid froze. He didn't fire, he didn't run, he just stood there, shaking eyes wide, and when I stepped into the red light, he saw me clearly for the first time. Not as a suspect, not as a stereotype, but as a man who wasn't afraid of him. I told him to put it down, told him he didn't have the eyes for this, and that line. That's not something you learn in a book, that's something you recognize, and he listened. He dropped the gun. I secured them, quick and firm, no anger, no speeches. And when I knelt by their leader and told him someone important was listening, he laughed at first until the voice came through calm and federal and very real, and I watched the color drain from his face. Names came out after that. Calls. A chief who liked to send men like them into houses like mine because he assumed nobody would fight back, and while we were talking, his panic button had already done its job. The second wave arrived not long after, and these guys were different. Quieter, tighter moving, like they'd been taught by people who don't teach anymore. And that's when I sent the kid to safety and opened the compartment behind the fireplace. I won't romanticize what came next. It was loud and ugly and efficient. Oil on the floor, darkness, gas, men slipping, shouting, dropping weapons, realizing too late that they were in someone else's space now, someone who knew every inch of it. I didn't kill any of them. I didn't need to. Neutralized is enough. When the street finally filled with government vehicles and lights that didn't belong to the local department, I stepped outside with empty hands, rain cooling my skin, and for a moment, it felt like it was over. It wasn't. Not really. Because corruption doesn't end at the front door, it hides in offices and behind glass and inside people who think a badge makes them untouchable. So when it followed me to the precinct, when I walked in with a few old friends who looked like regular guys, until you saw how they stood, how they watched, I knew this part mattered just as much. Guns were drawn, orders were shouted, lies were told loudly. And then right when it felt like it might tip the wrong way, the ceiling came down, literally federal teams pouring in from above and behind, and the room froze in that perfect moment where everyone understands the game is over. 3 months later, I'm back on my porch, same chair, same street house, a little stronger neighborhood, a little quieter. And sometimes the kid comes by, not a cop anymore, just a guy trying to do better. And we talk about choices, about moments where you decide who you're going to be when it costs something. I didn't do any of this because I wanted to be a hero. I did it because I was tired of being invisible, tired of watching people confuse quiet with weakness. So here's what I want to know from you. If you were that rookie, would you have dropped the gun? If you were my neighbor, would you have seen the man or just the label? And if you were me, standing in your own living room with everything on the line, would you have shown mercy or would you have gone all the way? Tell me in the comments. Argue with each other if you need to. These are the conversations that matter. And if this story hit you somewhere real like it did, me, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. There are more stories like this, and they don't end when the screen goes dark.